Good afternoon. I'm Sheldon Cooper, and this is Fun with Flags. No? No. Okay. Oh, shoot. Okay, I am Amanda Haas, and I am here on behalf of Bristol-Myers Squibb. I manage the operational excellence arm of Order to Cash for North America and South America. My assistant, actually, her name is Desiree Ayala, and she is one of the fearless analysts on our team, and she's going to be helping me toggle because I need her help. So she's up for anything. A little bit about me. I am a Floridian through and through. So what that means is I don't do snow. I did for a little bit, and then I ran back home. It took me 2-3 years before I figured that out. What else do I like? I like water skiing, and I have 2 kids. I call them A squared. Their names are Ariel and Asher. They're 5 and 2. I waited a while to have kids. What else? What else can I say about myself? I'm excited to be here. This is my second Tableau concert. It is a concert tonight, but yeah. Who is here from the life sciences, specifically biopharma industry? Wow. Procter & Gamble? Oh. Our new family, Celgene, introduced themselves earlier. We're happy to have you for sure. Oh, another one. Together. Amgen, another Amgen. What else? J&J? Who did I miss? Very cool. Pfizer. He's like this. He's like Pfizer. No, Bristol. Thank you. Who else? Anybody specifically from Order to Cash? Oh, cool. Very cool. So what I am not is a corporate BNA function. So what that means is, as an operational excellence arm, we're looking at leaning out the organization right from either project management, risk management, anything we can do to streamline the process, as our number one goal is to get medicine to our patients as quickly and accurately as possible, right? With as little waste. So I'm going to talk first, run through a little agenda. Go ahead. That's me. Thanks. You do nothing. Again, so real quick, I'm going to go through a little background of Order to Cash, since it looks like the majority of the group is not from Order to Cash. So we'll talk about that very, very briefly so we can get some context. And if you're not interested in that context, if you just fall asleep, maybe I'll come, I don't know, cover you up with a blanket. Go through some quick use cases, and then application, we'll get into some quick demos. And then if we have a little bit of a minute, I'll just talk very briefly about creating a MetricsDriven organization. With one thing in mind, I will be toggling back and forth to Tableau, not to confuse you, hence why Desi's going to help me out here for a second. But then my goal of this is to just rapid fire like a whole bunch of application cases. I'm not focusing on so much on design as I am like real world application. And by design, I mean, as an economist background, my master's is actually in econometric modeling. So I am probably the most literal person. So when it comes to pretty in dashboards, like I'm not your girl. I'm not gonna lie. Like I have awesome people for that, but global metrics and things like the global KPIs, I'm not touching a lot of those. We do have those, we have plenty of those, but again, I'm getting more to like more root cause analysis kind of stuff. So a little bit of background of Order to Cash. Our geography, like I mentioned, is North and South America. That includes Canada, United States, Colombia, Brazil, Venezuela, Peru, Mexico, and Chile. Thank you. And the functions that are in those pillars are things like customer master data, customer service inquiries. So we have a little bit of a call center, but not a huge one. Sales order management, and that spans everything from the customer order all the way through whether or not that order can be received. Do we have it in inventory? The whole process flow end to end. And then it gets dropped down to the distribution center, and then on the back end, right, back office we call it, the actual invoicing, accounts receivable, and credit management. A little bit of background to the journey of operational excellence. Back in the day, this function transitioned from a corporate geography down to a capability center. And so what that means is the first year that we kind of were involved, it was very much like establishing the function, right? All those processes, the work instructions, all the SOPs and things like that were brought down. The knowledge transfer occurred, and then maybe the next year or two, it was more like streamlining. The group knew what was going on, figured out where there was a little bit of pain point, where they could kind of consolidate some of the functions, and then implement some more controls where we found that there were risks. Beyond that, we kind of get into a phase where I'd probably call it, an involved data strategy, right? So we started deploying initial analytics tools, automating some things, macros and whatnot, things that the group, it was free, right? So what else were we going to do but our trusty Excel macros? Employing things like Power Pivot and any free BI that we had until we made the business case and built the capability. We automated a lot of the financial calculations, automated some of the reporting, and then the goal at the end of the day was to minimize the SAP transactional work that was occurring because we didn't have any better infrastructure. We fostered a continuous innovation framework, so project tracking, outcomes, benefits, things like that. And then established the metrics and governance program. We'll talk about that later on. And then first and foremost, which the biggest thing is stakeholder alignment. From the order to cash perspective, as you can imagine, everybody and their mother wants sales data, and that flows through order to cash, right? Seen somebody nodding, yeah. So although you report to your global finance infrastructure, which is actually an BMS, I know it's different in other organizations, invoicing can actually, I think Celgene, we were just talking about it, it actually is housed in, what did I say, logistics? It's in logistics. It's actually global finance for us. But my point there is we don't just report through order to cash or global finance. You have trade sales that wants access to customer data. They want the pricing and customer operations, government pricing. And oh, by the way, we're a federally regulated industry. So what does that mean? A lot of rules, a lot of audits. We have legal asking us for data requests all the time, and other corporate functions like that. And of course, we help the distribution and warehouse partners as well. So as we, again, get up to the operational excellence, it's how can we get this medicine to our patients? And I take this very personally. I actually have a couple family members that are on BMS cancer drugs. So you take it personally, you take it to heart, and our motto, if you're familiar with this campaign, is who do you work for? And in my case, I work for my Aunt Virginia, and I want to make sure that Aunt Virginia can get her medicine when she orders it quickly, that we don't bill her incorrectly, that our wholesalers and our distributors can get their credits on time so that if something happens with Opdivo, we can get them their credit and they're not waiting because, and some of you are familiar with the distribution model, some of the smaller distributors, $140,000 product or something could make or break a mom or pop like infusion center. So if they're waiting for that credit, they may have to hold off ordering the product for another patient. So nobody wants that. Very quickly, Tableau use cases. I'm obviously preaching to the choir here, but what I wanted to mention first is who's ever said data's data? Who's ever approached a data set? Oh, I can enter like any data set, and I'm going to be awesome at it. I think we're all taught that we can do that, and we're all getting really, really, really good at that. But one thing that's been my perspective over the past 10, 15 years is that it really helps to have that subject matter expertise, and Tableau allows us to do that, meaning you don't have to be in a corporate function. They certainly play a role. However, to have this capability within the actual operation where the people know every single end-to-end step of the process, knows what to look for, knows where it can break, knows their process flows, those are the people who need to be able to touch the data. So is it? I don't think data's data. I think data becomes important, not because everybody can just approach it, but because your people know it. Not just anybody, but your people know it. I know I have some procure-to-pay people in here that would probably agree, right? Who knows your data better than you? Nobody. So it's important to bring that function within the organization. So very quickly with that in mind, as part of the OpEx initiatives, some things were very obvious, right? We needed report automation. We couldn't have people just sitting here manually compiling tables from SAP, running BI reports, whatever. We needed to enhance the stakeholder relationships. We had people asking for things all the time. And certainly with things like acquisitions and mergers, which are very, very real right now, these things just keep growing, and you can never expand your team fast enough. So automation, first and foremost. Another thing is operation controls. Like I said, we're heavily audited, regulated, rules everywhere. So the first thing is, from an audit standpoint, what can we regulate in terms of control deviations, and what can we automate, and then immediately get down to root cause. Nobody wants to hurry up and do, is anybody familiar with a CAPA? Does anybody love CAPAs? Who hates CAPAs? I hate CAPAs. Nobody wants a kappa. So if we can catch it from a financial standpoint before, for instance, the end of financial close, I don't have to do a kappa. Nobody has to do a kappa. So if it's live, we link directly, thank goodness, to SAP HANA. But if you have it live, you can correct it, if caught, immediately and before monthly close so that this is not an audit issue. And we'll get to metrics later. Very quickly, just from a report automation standpoint, we did look at a lot of things. So why did we go with Tableau, right? You can tell very quickly from the top right chart, it's just a quick benefit efforts matrix. If you're familiar with that in OpEx, it's look at all of our options for how do we employ these things. And Tableau, quite frankly, was the cheapest and quicker for adoptability. So we went with that. Cost savings and avoidance. The hugest thing, what I was talking about a few minutes ago about internal ownership, is the group can own their own data set. We don't have to rely on anybody else. Again, they play their part, but we have to be able to move with the speed of business. So as the stakeholder changes, as the control changes, as something happens in the operation. So right now we're in the middle of an ERP, both an ERP conversion and a merger. So as you can imagine, that's going to fly. And we do not have time to wait to convey business requirements before the action needs to be taken. So here we are. And then, of course, leveraging this from a global perspective. Like I mentioned, although we're housed, I'm personally housed in Tampa, Florida, our stakeholders are global. So if there's something that I can build, for instance, for a US market, we can then very quickly deploy it for Latin America. And we have, and we'll see that in a second. Here's just an example. I don't want to focus on the words on the screen, but this is just a quick example of a quick heat map. Here, did I circle it? Very good. So here we're just showing that for certain products, right, the inventory can only go to certain distributors. So there are controls in place to say 100% of this product had better go to this distributor or we have a huge problem. One from a regulation standpoint, but there had been a lot of failures before then. But it's just a quick way to check where your inventory is down in your pipeline. Some metrics and measures, of course, right? We look at volume trends from a sales order standpoint, quantities, financial trends, what's happening at the product level, and then root cause analysis for if there are any anomalies. We look at actuals versus projections, of course, very easily, although, again, we're not officially the finance function. We are because we're first with the data. So when we talk about overlays in a second, we'll talk about how, as the owners of that back-end data, although we aren't the FP&A team, we have some of that finance experience on the team, so we can go ahead and consolidate what a lot of different groups are doing, all within the same spot, and we'll do that first. So very quickly, an order cash application. And I'll let you read that there for a second. And actually, my husband does not drink, but I feel like this quite often. So I figured you'd get a kick out of that. So has anybody heard the impression that your data should make you die? No? Let's simplify there for a second. So DIE is another quick descriptive for describing the data, right? Getting the facts, interpreting, and evaluate. So the problem with the proverbial black hole of data, and this is where the subject matter expertise comes into hand, the proverbial black hole of data is it can give rise to the wrong questions, the wrong answers, looking at the things that really don't matter. So when we talk about getting into the applications, it gets into a whole evolution of what we should be looking at, how often should we be looking at it, and do we need to look at something 6 months into the future that we aren't looking at now, given changes in the business forecast. So I very frequently tell my data to die a lot, but it's just something silly. First application I want to get to is talking about sales, right? First and foremost, sales. Everybody's interested in gross sales. So in this case, we needed to, go ahead and toggle. Thank you. So here we look at a quick, and again, remember, this is not the global KPI. I don't do with the Geldstedt model or whatever in this case. This is after a lot of collaboration with not just order to cash, but the trade sales organization, the finance FP&A team, and actually we did receive some inputs from BI&A when it comes to forecasting inventory levels. But what we do here is, let me preface this. So let's pretend like there's a company, and that company may or may not have gotten in trouble for selling too much product in December for sales figures. Just say that happened. And then they were allowing the returns to come in back in January, basically to fudge the numbers on Wall Street. Just say that could happen. I don't know anybody that did that. Moving on. That being said, what we're looking at here is an inventory analysis of our inventory on hand for our wholesalers. So what that means is how much product is in our channel versus the projected sales that we expect to happen, the projected out movement that the wholesaler is pushing out, and then the corresponding months on hand. So months on hand is what we are actually controlling for because we are not allowed to sell too much product at any given point, right? So in this case, this is a collaboration, like I said, between all the different groups because each of these pieces of data was getting floated, like our team initially, not our team, but the larger order to cash team was publishing the inventory data. Then the finance team was overlaying projected sales. And then the trade sales team, which actually this dashboard's now a couple months old by the time we prep this, there's now prescription data that the trade sales team will buy and overlay that as well if anybody's familiar with like that whole model. So TRX data is also overlaid. So you can see there were 4 different groups spending every Monday of the week compiling this data. How many, I don't remember what the outcome on that is, but it was like hundreds of hours that got, yeah, you're nodding, yeah. I'm glad you can relate. But there were multiple groups doing this. So now, as you can tell, what we're looking at now is for every given week, what's happened, let's just say it's medicine 1. For any given week, what's happening on the inventory level, what's happening on the actual sales versus projection, and then what's happening with our inventory MOH. So this is just one of the views. But the most important view that we like is this, that compiles the weekly trend versus the actual financial number that our executive leadership likes to see. Our EVP looks at this now every week. And why he looks at this, where normally they wouldn't have, is because the data had never been able to be compiled before, right? Like I said, it held different groups and every analysis was ad hoc. And the executive leadership way at the top said, I don't know what I'm looking at and I don't know if it's a problem. And what would happen is the finance group would say, oh, we had a huge miss because of inventory. But then the inventory group's like, oh, I don't see that there was a problem. And so they would kind of go back and forth, and the executive at the end of the day says, somebody's got to get me an answer. And so here's our result. So one of the things that we look at, like I said, is this MOH, and we cannot go outside of threshold. But some of the debate that pops up, and as you can see, I threw on a control line for plus or minus 3 standard deviations, but that was to prove, forgot who the stakeholder was, but to basically prove that all the volatility that was occurring in a certain brand was within a reasonable threshold, that there was no huge unexpected like swing either way, that all the behavior was as to be expected, that nobody should overreact, increase or decrease budget correspondingly. So that's an example of that. You can go ahead and toggle, please. Thank you. Next up, so like I said, I'm going to rapid fire a whole bunch of use cases. So that's just looking at sales inventory data. Now I'm going to rush and go into accounts receivable. So accounts receivable, like I said, a lot of different eyes on this for a lot of reasons. If you're a multi-billion-dollar company like Bristol-Myers Squibb, they manage cash very tightly, and you're global. You have a lot of people to pay and a lot of R&D expenses and things like that. So the treasury group is very, very interested in cash receipts. And then from a balance sheet perspective, of course, the finance group is very interested in AR from balance sheet ownership. So in this case, let's go ahead and toggle. So from an AR perspective, we look at a few things, right? We look at monthly AR, what's happening month over month. We've got our auditors wondering, why is your AR fluctuating? What's the key driver? What happened with this customer? What happened with that customer? So in this case, we look at percent of aged. And by the way, if you haven't figured this out, numbers are fudged. We've stripped out anything that's even remotely mirrors BMS. I mean, my group likes me, but probably not that much to let me talk about that. So yeah, all the numbers are fudged, but you get the idea. There are very heavy benchmarks in terms of metrics and KPIs for how much of the percent age we should have. It should always have around 2%. When it goes above 2%, absolutely this control chart will flag. And then very quickly from a flex analysis, the group always analyzes versus prior month, as you can tell from the quick KPI at the top. And then the question is, if they do see something go up or down versus prior month and they need to drill into it, then now at this point, the owners of the AR group now can just come here, click oh, okay, well something's aging, $300 million, you can click on it, goes and tells me which category, is it a rebate, is it an invoice, like what exactly is aging into that bucket, and most importantly, is it a write-off risk? So once they've clicked on it, you now have the drill downs, and if they see a huge flag, they can click on it, and of course, those, on the real one, there's, of course, tells you the customer, the transaction, the invoice number, how much was it worth, and how old it is. And this is actually now automated fully. Before, I think it took 2 days for the team to compile a monthly AR deck, and now, how long does it take you? 20 minutes, so that's a huge one. But not only that, most importantly, our stakeholders now, it's at the touch of their fingertips, they go to it, they don't ask for it, and it's not in a literally like 22 tabbed Excel file, and it has root cause. So our AR team definitely loves this one. From a category analysis standpoint as well, if they wanted to look at, you could have different business users that want the different categories, right? Because different teams may actually manage the different types of transactions. So in this case, we look at categories. This is a fake, you can pick one up top, but let's look at invoices as an example. Well, we don't have an aging problem, so anyways. So let's just say for this category, and again, it's always from like a monthly perspective, but here you can see beyond the category, there are subgroups. So what comprises it, and then it's the aging, and is there any like growing categories within the category, within the aging group? These are things that are monitored on a monthly basis, and the AR team, like I mentioned, manages it with the customer. Again, always start, and as usual, if you want to know what it is, which they actually do, they click on it, they go to the details so that they call the wholesaler or customer immediately and say, hey, these are the invoices in question, what's going on? Let's go ahead and toggle back, thank you. By the way, feel free to ask me questions as I go. We don't need to wait to the end. I'm pretty informal. I mean, I'm wearing a jacket, but yeah. Anything about AR? I can backtrack a second. Anything about the sales or MOH, the control chart, or anything like that? Okay, you guys got to get in line. Okay, let's keep going then. Thank you. Okay, moving on to product returns. Another facet, again, because we do see all the invoices are product returns. So when all the products get returned, they go to a third-party vendor. So there's some reconciliations that need to happen there for destruction purposes. But from an AR perspective, again, although we don't own the balance sheet or anything from AR, because we see the data, we're getting all the questions. So the finance team, what's going on? Why are returns for Opdivo high? What's going on? So we want to automatically highlight, first create something we can give to the team that we don't have to produce all the time. And then second, they can do their own self-service like drill downs. And let's go ahead. Thank you. Toggling back. So this is just an example. In this case, what we did is create some sets on top brands. I'm sure if you're like us, you have some brands that your company likes to keep a more stringent eye on, and others that kind of fade into oblivion for a little bit. So we do use sets to employ top brands, either manually or dynamically, depending on what's happening. If it's like a top 5 versus sales, or a top brand versus just from a monitoring perspective. And so here's a situation where we've grouped, we're pulling out the top brands statically and then throwing everything else into all other. And then here they like to see the distribution by brand, and as with everything, it's got filter highlight actions where you can click on the brand of any month, and it'll give you the detail first by customer, and then detail beyond that. And what happens when you throw a graph like this is you end up kind of losing what's happening in all other brand, and you lose your ability to highlight any anomalies when it's all grouped into an all other, right? And that can kind of come back and bite you. So in this case, we threw out the monthly trend, because you do have a lot of brands, but we threw out the top 10 brands and then another for all others, so that we couldn't see some huge issues that happened here, which we would have probably lost in a previous analysis, an earlier version of this. Also, from a returns perspective, is we also like to monitor short-dated product sales. So this is anything that gets sold that has less than, say, 12 months of shelf life when it leaves the distribution center. So in this case, anything that gets sold has to, again, more rules, right? The customer has to have provided written approval that they can receive it, and then it's monitored from a write-off perspective. So it does become a return risk. Sometimes they'll agree to receive it, but of course the finance group will want to know, yes, it went out, yes, you got approval, but there is still always a chance that it could come back, and do I need to adjust my reserve? So in this case, this is anything we went ahead and did all the calculated fields, do shelf life minus sale date or whatever, and to figure out how much shelf life it had at time of sale. And then for anything that's greater or less than 12 months, it'll show up here. And then with everything else, like I mentioned, you have an average line right here. And then if you click on it, you've got some highlight action here. But if you click on it, you can tell exactly like who bought it. Well, I, again, hit everything. But which batch it was to make sure there were no batch anomalies, or if there were no errors, like they first go back and make sure that the customer received approval. I think that was the main, what was I talking about? All right, so let's toggle back. Okay. Now, when we talk about financial adjustments, again, order to cash, another facet is all manual debit and credit adjustments for customer accounts flow through that organization. So as you can imagine, I don't know if you can tell, but there's an outlier. Just go on a limb and say that you notice that. The sad part about this is we built this chart in January. Can you tell what month that was? December. We built it in January. We had to do a kappa. But guess what? I don't have to do a kappa anymore because this is built. So in this case, which one was it? So as with the others, it'll highlight, it's very obvious to you where the issue was, and you can click on it and see the transaction. But if that's not good enough, we're going to do an outlier analysis very quickly. Let's toggle back. Thank you. Okay. So with this case, we're looking, like I mentioned, all other manual financial adjustments that are made to a customer account. So what that means is anything that flows through, we look at it by type. I'm not going to go through all the types right now. For your brain, it just says type 1. So in this case, there's a type 2 transaction that was processed in error. That was caught too late. But now moving forward, there are different business rules that we've incorporated into the outlier analysis. I have to imagine that in most other companies, you have things like grant of authority or approval authority. Any other names you call it? Out of curiosity. Who's order to cash? GOA? Threshold. So certain people are given certain thresholds for approving manual entries. So in this case, the default for the outlier, say, is $3 million. Anything above and beyond $3 million is an issue. So if it got processed, who did it, was it allowed, or whatever. So as you can see, just from an outlier analysis, most of our GOA stops at 10 million, or you can tell if I were to do a Pareto, which we did later. A Pareto chart basically said that 99% of all transactions happen less than $5 million. So what's this? That was an issue. So once we bumped the threshold up to 5 million, certainly out of range, then it should only show this one. And of course, as soon as I click on it, I can see exactly what the transactions were for. And everything with what we do is line level. So you'll see a whole bunch of transactions, but you'll see the error. Any questions there? Okay. Let's talk about it. Sure. Mm-hmm. Right. So yes, not in this chart, but in practice, yes, we do. So depending on the product, we'll determine the returns policy for that good. So some may have 12-month policy or 6 months before, 12 months out, or something like that from the sell date or expiration date. So certainly, yeah. We, like I said, we build it by brand. So we'll look at the brand and then push it out. Yes? Sure. Mm-hmm. You're looking at like pricing changes? Or like credits? So like rebates? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so we do have some rebate modeling and things like that that go into more of like the gross to net adjustments, like not necessarily the gross sales figures, which is mostly the invoice. Like anything that's invoiced will be at gross sales. So our team doesn't look a lot at like the rebate adjustments per se, but you're interested in modeling out the rebates? Is that what you mean? Right. Yeah, why not? Because I think the same analytic piece applies, right? How big was the rebate or incentive, right? Who applied the incentive? Was it under a certain category or incentive program? Did it go, time series always plays a role? Are the incentives going up or down? Is it going up or down by customer, up or down by program? Is it like that sort of thing? Yes. Yeah, we'll overlay certainly. Something has to go with it, right? You have to assume there's something that's correlated that's driving it, right? And there's either, to your point, a lag or it's just a percent of the sale. Yeah, we do that for cash discounts where it's like a flat to 1.5% or something like that. We'll drag that out. Yep. Here on the presentation, I'm just highlighting the use of the parameter to identify the outliers. And then very quickly, we talk about from a logistics standpoint, again, we're not the logistics arm, but to get the full end-to-end process view, we do work with our logistics partners to build out some monthly communication or quarterly communication. So we do kind of look at some of their stuff and build and help them build the capability within their organization by just, we meet every year just to talk about the pain points and the full end-to-end process and where we can help fill the gap to bridge it. But one thing I really wanted to highlight was, I don't have a Tableau demo for it, but it's a concept of looking at freight charges. So in this case, when we talk about speed to patient, freight charges are manually applied depending on what happens with expedited shipments, right? Patients in the hospital, something's going on, they need it, very, very fast. They can't wait to get it through a wholesaler channel, so it goes direct. Legacy system or whatever, somebody's charging freight charges. The question is, should we charge freight charges? Well, let's go ahead and analyze it. And this, of course, as you can imagine, went all the way to the top. But the question is, as you can tell by the chart, or you can't, it's very small, I apologize. The idea here is the average, this is an example, of course, but let's say the average is $100. That's nothing relative to what we were looking at. So if the question is, do you want to hold up a shipment to a patient who needs it right now in order to get approval for a $100 freight charge? And by the way, that's the average, right? That's speaked up by a huge outlier that happened in May. So beyond that, if you look at what's happening on the right side, which is basically the percentage in each of those bins, 90% of it was less than, which bucket was that? $50? $50. So yeah, it's not even $100. It was $50. Do you want to hold up shipping a patient life-saving medicine, or do you just want to give it to them? Yeah, it didn't take long for both the trade organization and our executive leadership to all agree this is a no-brainer. You give the patient, don't hold it up for freight charges and let it go. So these are the types of things that have real-world impact for our patients that Tableau can very quickly give credence to, because if it comes from somebody's Excel pocket, it doesn't have the same form of weight, if you haven't noticed. Otherwise, you can just say, well, Amanda didn't do it, Tableau did. Tableau said that, I didn't say it. It didn't come from my email, it didn't come from Amanda or Desi. We can say, no, Tableau said. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, Tableau said it. So it's a huge, huge, huge win for us. From a regional market view, this is just using an example of how we will roll up countries into a regional view. And then each of those will have their own respective tab you can click on, and then certainly drill down each within their ordering metrics. This is just a list of some random metrics and some other stuff that we look at. Like I mentioned, order volume, AR balance, customer composition, brand and customer sales, product returns, team productivity, telephony stuff. We've got him in the room. Did you work on that? Very cool. Order automation rates, delivery automation rates, invoice automation rates. Like I said, anything we can do to lean out and get things as automated as possible is certainly part of our objectives. Credit and debit adjustments, we went through some of those examples. Inventory management we talked about. And then, of course, project status tracking, which is on the more simpler side, but still mandatory and very important. I do want to fly through very quickly just building a metrics-driven organization and getting a very quick roadmap to that. If you don't already have one in your organization, it is imperative for an operational excellence arm to have a form of metrics-driven organization. So in this case, first step, what should be measured, right? We all talk about it. You can't picture, no, I'm just kidding. Put your cameras down. I'm just kidding. Take it up. Take it up. You're welcome to do it. First thing, of course, is what should be measured. And then develop the suite. Second step, develop and analyze. You're compiling your data sets. You're creating your templates for auto and easy updating. And this part has to be automated. You can't spend your time here, right? So develop it and then hurry up and get to analyze. The governance is just as important. If you've got a metric or a KPI that you don't have a governance program on, nobody's looking at it. And if nobody's looking at it, you're not affecting change. So that's the part that continues to evolve over time. So you come up with what's the cadency? Are you meeting monthly? Are you meeting weekly? Are you meeting quarterly? And then who are you meeting with? You may have a different metrics deck for an executive leader versus you do your operational, and then you may meet with them on different cadences. Like I mentioned, from the end-to-end process with our logistics, our logistics partners, we release a quarterly newsletter that does full end-to-end, like a very executive level, high level, like KPI snapshot from all the main functions all the way through AR, including logistics, perfect order, those types of, order cycle, things like that. So those go in there as well. And together, cross-functionally, we release a joint statement, if you will, but a newsletter that goes out. And that first, we kind of just started, how long has that been? Already? So we started that this year, but we've gotten some pretty good feedback on that. And then, of course, what's a KPI without goals? Like a lot of metrics that we see, we just, okay, here's your metrics, it's a number. But is it good? Is it bad? Is it high? Is it low? Is it too high? Is it too low? What's your threshold? So for each metric or KPI, if you're measuring it, set a goal. So either it could be based off of an average history. Like here's a normal operation is, say, 50,000 in returns. So instead of saying, we can't set a goal on returns, right? You can't change what the customer necessarily is doing, but you can still have it flag what's outside of plus or minus, 10% threshold or something like that. So like I said, it can either be based off of historical average, or you can have a benchmark goal. So like I said, percent due, for instance. A lot of the industry thinks 2% past due should be your goal. Everything should go below 2%, so therefore it's more of an industry-based benchmark. And then take action, right? So because of the missed KPI, right, because you have a goal, what's going to happen? Are you above or below trend? Why? Are you above or below your goal for, invoice automation? If you're below it, why? And what are you going to do about it? So these things, our group specifically has a monthly metrics governance meeting with the functional leads where we review a more operational functional deck with the leads, and anything that looks weird, there's more of an accountability. And they're explaining why it's like that, which we've given them the tools and we're helping them come up with that commentary, but then certainly what's the action plan? From a telephony standpoint, right, if there's a telephony issue, is it due to one associate? Do they need more training? Are they having bad coverage during lunch or something like that? And from an EDI or invoice automation standpoint, if we're not hitting our goal, is it one customer? Is there an error in what's coming through the electronic transfer? These are the types of things that we're looking at on a monthly basis. Goes back to what I said. If you don't communicate your KPIs, it's kind of like it didn't happen. So I suggest either the newsletter or your monthly meetings with either your leadership, quarterly with executive or something. This is just an example of a dashboard that the executive and some organizations said I need one page, because they all do, right? They all need one page, so they wanted a whole bunch of it. I'm like, that's a lot of stuff on one page. Like, but I want one page. I'm like, let me look at it. It's ridiculous. But just an example. The most important part of this is not necessarily what the graph that Tableau is doing, right? But you may notice a commentary box at the bottom. So in the commentary box, however you do it, either through newsletter or, in this case, we review this on workday 1 of every month with the finance groups. It's commenting on, here's some anomalies that are happening with short-dated sales. This is what we expected to happen with AR. Here's write-off, risk happening with this customer. So the commentary is the bread and butter of our metrics. Go ahead. I'm sorry? Oh, no, ma'am, this is, I wish. Some of it is, right? In our tooltips, we'll put in, I don't know if you noticed, I probably did it very quickly, but as you highlight on some of the things in Tableau, it puts it into real words like AR was up 30 million month over month due to ABC distribution. So some of it's automated, but this compilation certainly is like in a Word document or something. The compilation of the commentary is not in Tableau, but the little snippets probably are. You know what I mean? Go ahead.
Do you guys use Tableau Server at all and the subscribe functionality so people can request it?
We do, and we actually have, we're very happy to have Sujit. If you raise your hand, he's actually our Tableau admin at Bristol-Myers Squibb. I have to admit, you probably have the statistics on this more than I do. I certainly use subscriptions for myself. I know some do. I can't tell how often, though. Certainly at. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it depends on the dashboard, but certainly it is used. Mm-hmm. Oh, cool.
And I was wondering if you are actually trying to index your KPIs at some point to provide a more normalized understanding of how you're doing in timeliness, efficiency, key attributes of each and every KPI.
So like I mentioned at the beginning, hopefully this answers your question. So what I didn't show you was the executive KPI page. You know what I mean? So the thing that I was discussing was maybe published like in the quarterly newsletter is, I don't know if this answers your indexing question, but yes, there's a more consolidated KPI view of this that tells the health of the organization. That's what I'm saying, yeah. I didn't really discuss the more executive view. For us, it's more, in this respect, it was more how can we use it from an operational excellence perspective to affect change. So part of that was the root cause, setting the control limits and things like that. But from a KPI perspective, certainly we have them aggregated and pretty little KPI boxes. But no, we didn't really talk about that a lot there. And I worked for a food distributor for a long time, so distribution and trucking, I got a soft spot for that. Mostly the food part, but go ahead. Desi, you want to take this?
So we did, this was done by screenshot?
This is not Tableau, to answer your question. Long story short, I just don't want to say it out loud. Yeah, no, this is the most painstaking thing because what's happening is it could be consolidated, but we keep going back and forth. This is on the fly. Like I said, this is a workday one thing, and what's happening is we're only compiling what's important for that month to give to the VP of Finance. So sometimes he wants to see AR, sometimes he wants to see returns, sometimes he wants to see DSO, or sometimes he wants to see short-dated or anything where there's an anomaly. So certainly that's not something that could be published in Tableau or automated because we're at this point, part of your metrics review is to already get those insights for the business leaders, right? So they don't have to go looking around. So we're only compiling him things for which we have commentary that is important for the month-end close. You know what I mean? So no, this is just a hodgepodge in, I don't know, Word or PowerPoint or something. I don't know. Yes?
Can you speak a little bit about the automation? What do you mean by the optimization that you have from the source of data
Tableau. Okay, one example is billing blocks. Do you have a billing block? So what's happening is, as transactions flow through the invoicing system in SAP, it could get hung up for whatever reason, right? So manually, somebody was compiling 7 SAP tables in an Excel file with various VLOOKUPs and all sorts of things, ad hoc, once or twice a week. We don't like that, certainly. So Tableau, that's one example. Another one is, what else did you? Short-dated. The short-dated product sales was one that was compiled ad hoc, but we realized very shortly that a lot of people wanted this live. They wanted to look at it throughout the month, not just when it was reported on the month end. So we needed to get that live and automated. So every single thing that you see used to be a manual report to some degree, certainly with very, very minimal interaction, unfortunately. But it was all tabular data and sent out, and then each group individually would do their own analyses. And of course, we don't like that because it was ad hoc and just not reliable at the end of the day, and it wasn't live. By the time it was distributed, of course, it was out of date. So from an operational standpoint, nobody wants to wait 2 weeks to find out which sales orders are on block or which invoices are on block that need to get, invoiced and hit the balance sheet. So literally everything on this chart at one point was a manual report. Yes? I'll try to answer for 2 groups. So my group, we have SQL experience, but as you can imagine, this is only a portion of what we do, right? Which is why we love Tableau. Certainly we could do that. So we're actually converting to S/4HANA, but right now we're using an SAP HANA sidecar. But to answer your question, some of the groups, yes, build views in HANA, right? They'll create views within the sidecar and then link to that. Our group does not have author rights to SAP HANA sidecar. It's true. I don't have rights. So no, we're doing joins on our own. So the expectation for my team to do this is they do have relational database experience to do the joins on their own. Of course, I saw the noodles, which is awesome. But of course, we are not on the newest version of Tableau Sujit. I'm not trying to point fingers. So unfortunately, yeah. So yes, depending on where you are in the organization, some of the views get written directly to SAP HANA. Otherwise, we're building the views ourselves. But again, my point though is to say where we love Tableau is that it gives our group with dealing with people who may or may not have had any data visualization. I thankfully did. I have employed BI tools in the past. But Desi, for instance, went from nothing to be very proficient in Tableau in no time, and everybody's more productive for it. And she did not have data modeling experience before Tableau. So huge use case. Anything else? It's in SAP. The dunning is done within SAP ERP, like it's done in the ERP system.
So you use your Tableau report just for your analysts to see what's going on, and it's internal.
Yep. Yeah, that's all managed in all that year. Actually, we have another order to cash, BI background. Did I answer that right about dunning? Yeah, we don't do anything with it. It's done already. Anything else? Oh, we're early. Hey. Anything else? I'll be here until 5, but otherwise I'll give you 10 minutes so you can go relax before data night out, if that's okay. Anybody, any objections? No, right? Go. I mean, come on. Thank you so much.